So for today, I want to talk about the top 10 things we see wrong in continuous auditing projects. Some apologies to see what we've got here. So the number one thing is, and we've sort of heard this, compliance is the lead. And I can't say it enough, we've heard it enough, that to really make these things work, it's got to be involved with operations. And what we look at this sort of value map, and if you think about your generic org chart, the classic thing is to think about continuous auditing as being something that's going to improve compliance, it's going to reduce our risks, we're going to implement it, and you know, gosh, that is a good idea. And then we just get the left side, the reduced compliance cost is sort of the icing on the cake. But let's prove and drive the entire business case around the idea of how we're going to make the business work better. And the idea is pretty simple. I mean, it's something you've all seen in quality, right? If I'm continuously monitoring, I can find a problem. If this is a multi-step business process, I can find the problem early. And just, we all know the earlier you find a problem and fix it, the better. If I let this mistake go, I keep adding more work to that mistake and I'm wasting time. And I have more work to undo if I'm trying to recover or fix the problem. And if I ever let that mistake leave the company boundary, then the costs go through the roof, right? I send the wrong check to a vendor, overpayment. I shipped the wrong chemical to one of my customers. We actually had a case with a client where we just started monitoring their order-to-cash process, and we caught where someone shipped not the chemical the client asked for, but something different, and it turns out the one they shipped would have caused an explosion. So, you know, the cost of that error would have been astronomical, you know, had they caught it later. I'll make a question could always be here. Gosh, if I had perfect controls in place, nothing should ever go wrong, right? I mean, that's the whole point of controls. I can anticipate every problem. Yeah, I'll get SAP, Oracle Financials, JD Edwards configured correctly and everything will work. Well, I'm a mechanical engineer by undergraduate degree, and you would never think of having an open loop control system in the mechanical engineering world. You always have a closed loop feedback control, some way to measure the output and make sure things are working like you planned, because your plan can never account for all the possible things that will go wrong. And that is basically what you're talking about here. You can never account for how inventive the people using the applications and running the business will be to find a way to circumvent controls. It's impossible. They're generally always doing it for good intentions, but they find ways around every possible preventive control. It causes the problems in the business. If we can find those problems, we can make a business case. Number 9, your eyes are turn them all on. It crushes people. You end up, the problem is, you know, you will find a lot of stuff and you end up with this gigantic pile of problems to look through, and that kills people operationally. Now, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out why this happens. Why do people do that? And I think it's kind of a hangover in finance from having to deal with ERP implementations. And, you know, if you didn't get whatever feature implemented, you're never going to get it. Once the implementation's done, the consultants go away and you're stuck with what you have. The worst problems we've had in implementations are where someone adopted that philosophy and you've got to now feel like you've got to dig through this big pile of exceptions all the time. It's much better to do these in an iterative fashion. Let's look for a few problems and take care of them. Now, there's kind of two philosophies. Start at the beginning of the process, or let me just watch stuff at the end. Frankly, we find most often the most successful way is to at least stop problems kind of at the company boundary and then work your way backwards through the process. Implementing new analytics every 90 days, every 180 days. Don't try to implement them all at one time. Number 8, look through this report, please. So if you're thinking about involving people in operations, think about their life. If I'm going to email them out this long report and say, hey, check and find the problems you're responsible for and get back to me, that's just, it's at the very least very tedious thing to do, not very efficient, not very effective. Oops. Whoa. That was way further than I wanted to go. Excuse me on that. Yeah. I'll be fast. Hold on. Sorry about that. Actually, I probably should have. Heard all this. Great. Love it. Exactly. Recapping, please. So you got to make it easy for the people in operations to have a way to prioritize their work. We happen to use something, we call it a priority. It's a confidence, how confident we are this is a problem. Multiply it by the dollar value, you kind of get an expected value calculation. It gives you a way to prioritize your work. Make it easy for the people in operations to understand why this is a problem, right? Don't make them go do the investigation. Provide some plain English for them saying, hey, here's the 3 reasons why we think there is something wrong with this transaction. Read it. Now you can understand it. You're off to a start. Give them the supporting detail. Make it right available. So you're going to have a conclusion. Someone in operations is going to have to decide whether or not they agree with that. Let me look at the supporting information and then give them a sort of a workflow, a way to handle it. The first person that gets the problem may not be able to fix it. They may need to pass it off to someone else. Number 7, let's learn a specialized analytical language. And I will be, the speaker two earlier, harping on the SQL thing. It's sort of, I guess, I'm a software guy for the last 20 years. And, in reality, the query language debate was over, at least from a general IT standpoint, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, the answer is SQL. So if we're going to bring people through anybody that does the kind of internal audit rotation, if someone from finance go through internal audit a couple of years, why would I go teach them some skill set that they'll never use again? Why don't I teach them SQL, which is a generally applicable language? On top of that, the resources are available. This is a posting from Monster SQL Jobs. Let's see, 400 people posted a resume day before yesterday, 1,200 in the last 2 days. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of skill set. The question on what the world standard query language is long been over. Number 6, let's clean up the last 2 years of exceptions. A lot of times you'll do historic analysis to try to get your analytics tuned, and someone says, hey, let's go after those. Well, now all of a sudden you've got some pile of tens of thousands of things for people to look through, and you're trying to get this incorporated in operations, and they don't have the bandwidth to do that. What we found is effective is, okay, let me go put it into a folder of old exceptions. Maybe you hire some consultants to go after that, whatever. But what you let the people in operations do is just focus on what went wrong yesterday, which should be a handful of things, should be 5, 10, some number that they can manage in proportion to their overall job. It is a manageable exercise, and now you can get some momentum behind the program. Number 5, we think just about continuous audit and don't drive this towards continuous improvement. And this is actually a point where we see some of the more forward-thinking internal audit departments moving themselves, is really thinking about helping the business improve the processes. And the trick to do is if you're monitoring all these exceptions, what you have to do is assign reasons to them, reason codes. We have a facility and the software to do that, but whatever you do, every time you adjudicate a problem, let's assign some set of reason to it, and then over time I can track and I can start saying, okay, I want to, let's figure out how we eliminate this problem. I mean, this is just classic quality kind of analysis, but we're sitting here doing it and finding all these problems. Why wouldn't we drive some kind of process improvement activity like this? And now all of a sudden, as an internal audit department, you're really adding business value for people. I mean, this is adding real value, and it is not. It's not that hard to do, really. Once you're already here monitoring all the transactions, it's very easy. Now, the number 4 thing that's wrong is don't know how to spell. People don't participate. Miklos' last name, right? If your last name had been easier to spell, I think this whole market would have taken off much faster. Number 3, we only think about this for AP. We've looked at this Value curve. People love to start on disbursements for continuous monitoring. It's easy. The business process is pretty straightforward, it's pretty easy to do. And frankly, it doesn't hurt anything if it goes wrong, things go wrong. The value though add is also pretty basic. As you start going up and getting into order management and other things like that, or sales, the order to cash cycle, the transactions get more complicated, but the value they add are also getting more. It goes higher, and sort of a corollary to the value add, the cost of any error goes up as well. So we really, it's great to start on disbursement, but really have a plan for moving up the curve and into some of the higher value business processes. Now things get tricky when you do that. You start going in sales into what we've seen people do an outlier-centric approach as opposed to exception-centric. So this is a case we're working with a large distributor. They have an ERP system that absolutely keeps you from discounting more than 20%. And so we certainly have the cases talked about earlier where someone violates the segregation of duties, but there's actually an opportunity inside that 20%. So every discounted order, there's nothing wrong with, we're supposed to let people discount, but I want to start looking for patterns of activity. I want to start looking for the fact that, wow, this customer always gets the maximum discount when he talks to that rep. Every other time he comes up to the counter, he doesn't get that. Or this customer always gets the maximum discount from us all the way around the country. So they've all shared something. Whenever I have product C on the list, everything else is discounted more. Tells me product C might not be price competitive. Again, these aren't really control problems precisely in terms of the control work. We kept the discount at 20%. But they're absolutely business improvement problems, and potentially, in the case of the rep giving the same guy a discount, there may actually be a fraud issue. There may be some kind of kickback issue going there as well. Number 2, bringing a knife to a gunfight. What I'm trying to say here is the easy problems are already being found by the ERP systems. And what that means, it takes some advanced analytic techniques to really find these problems. You're not going to find the same invoice number going to the exact same vendor in any well-designed ERP system. It just doesn't happen. But there are other more advanced analytic techniques you can bring in place. You can start finding things that are similar. You can start finding, again, the fact that it is statistically out of line how many times Miklos always gets the discount when he goes to the beer store. Something's going on there. And you start getting your way, by using advanced techniques, you can start finding the interesting problems, the unusual activity. Things are actually technically okay, but look unusual. It's something we ought to look at. And the number one thing wrong with continuous auditing projects is not using oversight. Any questions?